What's up, guys? Today's a really good day, not only because I finally finished this art piece, but because it's my baby boy's birthday. Come here, Charlie. Come here. Come here, man. You gotta say hi. God, I love him so much. The legend, honestly, the legend himself, Charlie. My boy, how are you, sweetheart? So Charlie is 5 today, which is insane because it feels like, okay. Which is insane because it feels like I just got him like yesterday. Also because he forever looks like a puppy, but his puppy energy, oh my God, I love it. Had to get that out there. Today's art piece is one that sort of just popped up, okay? I was cruising through Instagram late one night and I got served an ad for this mold. We're gonna change this up. So I did. I don't want to spoil anything about this art piece, but if you're a peanut butter lover out there, you're gonna love this piece. I love peanut butter, and so I figured why not make a clock where it is always a good time for peanut butter. So you know what's funny? When I was editing this video, I told myself I wouldn't do that. I told myself I wouldn't make that little reference joke, and I did, and I'm sorry, but
take me for who I am.
Sit back, enjoy this art video. If you guys enjoy peanut butter, please give this video a thumbs up, or if you just like my videos in general, give me a thumbs up because it helps. Okay, I don't want to keep talking. Check it out. Here is how I made a peanut butter clock made with peanut butter candy. Enjoy. So this DIY starts with a mold. Now this mold I found online, and its original purpose was to be a mold for a tray. However, when I saw it, I figured, you know, this is a really good mold to make a clock with stuff embedded in it. And that's when it hit me. Peanut butter cups in the center. So we went with it. Okay, gloves. We're out of gloves. We got a new box right here. If you leave UV resin in a cup, it will eat through the plastic. Look at this. Oh my God, it ate the whole bottom of the cup out. Shoot. Now, just to be clear, that is UV resin, not normal resin. The resin we're using for this clock is called art resin. It will not eat the bottom of a cup out. It's a 2-part resin, it's 1-for-1, it's super easy, and there's no toxic fumes. So basically, whatever you pour of hardener, you pour the exact same amount of resin and then mix it together for 2 minutes. And the important thing is that you're scraping the sides as well. You wanna make sure it's fully mixed. Now back to the mold. We're gonna pour one base layer around the lip of this tray mold. This is to ensure that when we put the candies inside, they won't be sticking out because there's a layer of resin there to protect it. Now it's time for the candy that inspired this art piece. I was at the candy store for the fruit tray that I did on TikTok and my Instagram. I didn't actually put it on YouTube. And I saw these guys and I'm like, I love the colors. It's very like retro 70s looking. So it inspired the peanut butter clock because I also love this candy. I went ahead and I started loading the lip of this mold with this peanut butter candy, making sure that there was no gaps in any of the candy. Next, it's time for our next resin pour. You guys are gonna notice throughout this DIY, there's quite a few layers of resin added into this clock. And whenever you're submerging something in resin, you're gonna be working with multiple layers. So we poured in our second layer. This is gonna cover the bottom of the tray and it's gonna seep into the candy. Technically a part of the same layer, I just had to mix more resin. I went ahead and topped up the mold until it was right at the rim. Now with the mixing process of the resin, I added a lot of air bubbles into this, which when the resin hardens, it's gonna be cloudy and it's gonna be very obvious. And you can see it here, it's all around the clock. But it's not hard to get rid of that. Today I'm using a heat gun and I'm just gonna quickly brush it over. Because this is candy and because it's chocolate, it melts super easy. So you don't wanna put this super hot heat gun over the candy for too long. And you can see here, it's just one quick swipe over and all the bubbles are gone, leaving you with crystal clear resin. The important thing here is that you're constantly moving it. Because this heat gun gets so hot, you don't wanna burn the resin, but you also don't wanna melt the candy on the inside. Now that the mold was topped up, we had to get rid of some of the candies because you could see they're sticking out a little bit. And then I made sure all the candy was fully submerged into the tray. Now when I removed some of the candy, the resin sort of sank in a little bit more, so I just topped it up to the rim again. Now I will say if I was working with a sculpture, I would get rid of the bubbles beforehand in a vacuum chamber, but since this is a flat surface, the bubbles rise to the top and it's very easy to pop with a heat gun. Now that our mold is full of resin, we've got our peanut butter and chocolate candy surrounding the outside. The inside, you're gonna see what I'm gonna do after this dries, but the reason why we're not coating the inside, you'll see. Fully submerged candies. This mold was originally a tray mold, but we're gonna make it into a clock. Just the way it is, I think this should work perfect actually. So next we're gonna leave this for 12 hours to cure and come back in the morning and then do step 2. The next morning, morning, it was ready for step 2, and it cured perfectly. None of the candy was sticking out, and the resin was clear. We removed it from the mold, and now you can see what this mold is originally intended for, to make little trays like this. However, I don't use trays. I don't know how many people actually use trays, and if you do, usually rectangular is a little bit more fitting. So I knew right from the get-go I was not going to be using this for a tray, and instead I'd be making clocks with it. Now the key when you're working with resin is the 12-hour mark. It is your second chance to clean anything up, and this is because it's very gummy at this point. Next, I'm gonna make sure the clock is level. So for this, I'm using a level. And you can see here that the bubble is in the center, which means it is level. And then I went ahead and did it the other direction, and again, it was level. Never thought I'd say level so much. Now it's time to load the center with peanut butter cups. Now I wasn't sure how many peanut butter cups would actually fit inside, so I went around the first ring, and unfortunately they didn't fit snug, so I had to create spaces, and then I made a little circle on the inside. And here I added one too many. It looks too crowded, and I was like, you know what, maybe I'll break them up, and I was like, no, I don't want to break the peanut butter cups up, so I ended up removing one, leaving the center empty. Which works perfectly because that's where the clock mechanism is going to go anyways, and we're going to drill through there. So this worked out perfect. Now it's time for another layer of resin. Now I want to show you guys something. Here it is pre-mixed, it's clear, then it goes foggy when the chemical reaction happens, and then through 2 minutes of stirring, it's going to go clear again. This is a really good indicator visually on how to know if your resin is properly mixed. And now I'm pouring the resin in the center of the clock, letting it sort of go into the cracks and the dents and the imperfections of these peanut butter cups to fully submerge it and to get rid of any air bubbles. Now I'm going to show you guys a new technique. This is called a flood pour. You're going to notice once the resin rose to the top of the center, it started to pour over the side. This is going to make one flat layer of our clock. Instead of having sort of a ring around, it's gonna make it smooth. And it's just gonna drip off the side, which you can see here. But again, at the 12-hour mark, this stuff could just easily be ripped off. But it looks amazing. The flood pour worked out great. You can see it's one consistent, flat, clear layer of resin, which is gonna make our clock look even better. Like, look at this light reflection. Ooh! Oh, it is so nice. Oh, I highly recommend flood pours for anything flat. If it's something with detail, you'll actually lose the detail, so I don't recommend it for anything like that. 12 hours later, it was time to check on it. And it was perfect. The peanut butter cups stayed in place, there was no sort of weird reaction, and it worked out great. And here's reason number 2 as to why the 12-hour mark is so essential with resin. If you were to spill it, or in this case do a flood pour and it spills over, which it's intended to do, the 12-hour mark is when it's very gummy, and this is a perfect visualization as to see its texture. It just rips, it tears, because earlier than this, it's still gonna be liquidy and like very syrupy and sticky, and later than this, it's gonna be almost too hard. Now with that layer of resin, it was still thin. You could see I dented one of the peanut butter cups with my finger because the layer of resin was so thin, it was actually very flexible still. Which is okay because we're gonna do another layer of resin anyways. But since I dented it, I wanna show you guys that resin is in fact self-leveling, so it'll clean that up perfectly. Now it's time for our clock numbers. So we're using a Cricut. I'm gonna use the Cricut mat to measure the edge of the clock, which is thankfully just 1 square. But I know, I get it. My Cricut mat gives you anxiety. It's super messy. I don't care. You know, it's so much about the art, but you guys seem to care so much about the stuff that really doesn't matter. I've clearly used this Cricut mat many times for many art projects. It's never affected me, but since you guys are my consumers of watching my content, I'll clean the mat for you, okay? Here, you can see it's 1 square length, which means our letters have to be 1 square length. Now, let's clean our mat. We're using isopropyl alcohol and a scraper for this. We're gonna pour the isopropyl alcohol on the mat, and this is to help remove the stickiness that these mats come with. For those of you that aren't familiar, Cricut mats are meant to be sticky, so your paper or whatever you're cutting will actually stick to it. And so we're using 99% isopropyl alcohol and a sponge, and we're just gonna sort of rub it around the mat just so it gets everywhere. Once the mat was fully soaked in isopropyl alcohol, it was time to start to scrape. And I will admit, as time consuming as this was, it was very satisfying. And I agree, it needed to be cleaned, okay? So I just went in almost like I was cutting the grass, and it just totally melted away. The isopropyl alcohol really helps with getting the paper removed, but also I needed to get rid of the glue underneath it all. And you can actually see on the mat, it's lighter where I've scratched it, and that's because I've gotten rid of that glue. Now after I did the first pass, I went ahead with more isopropyl alcohol, and then I went and started scraping again. Now to avoid any further comments, I went super detailed with this and I got it completely bare bones down to the plastic sheet. But I will also admit I was annoyed that you guys are focusing on such unimportant things when it comes to creating stuff. In my world, as long as the job gets done, the mat is completely fine. Once it was all cleaned up, our Cricut mat was no longer sticky, which was a problem because this needed to hold our paper or our vinyl or whatever. And you can see here, it's not at all sticking to my glove. So for this, we're gonna use Easy Tack. This stuff is like glue that'll never dry, it just remains sticky. Picture a movie theater floor, but in a can. That's the best way to look at it. So I went ahead and did a few passes of that, and then let it dry for honestly probably a minute, and it's good to go. A minute later, you can see our stick is back and our mat is officially cleaned. You're welcome. Okay, back to the clock. It's time for the Cricut machine. This is my favorite thing. This is my first love with DIYs, and I can't recommend this machine enough to people. Today, we're gonna use this premium vinyl. It is Ivory Pearl. I figured this would be nicer than just using a white or a flat black. Also, this roll of vinyl was twice the price. It was like $25 versus $12. But it's okay, because we're actually using just a tiny, tiny bit, and I'll have a ton left over for other projects. Load it into our Cricut machine, and then hit cut. And for those of you that don't know what a Cricut machine is, it's got a blade and it'll actually cut anything that you design on the computer out to the exact point. Now it's time to set our clock up with how it's going to be displayed. So where the 12 is going to go is important. That's going to be the top of the clock. Now get this. I was driving and I'm like, you know what, we got to make it more peanut buttery, surprising enough. And I'm like, how many letters are in peanut butter? And it's 12. So I figured instead of using numbers, we were gonna use the word peanut butter to be the numbers. Genius, come on, genius. Now I'm gonna cut out the letters individually so I can place them individually. Now since we're having the word peanut butter instead of numbers, the N is gonna act as the 12, which is also the middle letter of peanut. And a big trick here if ever you're making clocks is always do the 12, the 3, the 6, and the 9 first. The other numbers you could fit in between, but these are the ones that are important so your clock actually works. Once those were placed, it was a lot easier to space out the remaining letters. The Ivory Pearl looks so good. I'm so happy I went with that color. Now it's time for another flood pour. I'm doing this because I want to add another layer to the thin layer on top of the peanut butter cups, but I also want to lock in our peanut butter font. Once the resin has started to settle, it's okay to go in with a popsicle stick and sort of just help it go over the edges. And then of course, hit it with the heat gun to get crystal clear resin.
Damn, that is some smooth ass resin, look at that. By morning, this should still be pretty soft because I'm doing this so late at night that I should be able to just like cut that with scissors, clean that up. Usually I'd recommend putting this on a stand and letting it drip off, but it's too late now. Yeah, we're gonna leave this overnight. That was the final top coat. A little bit more protection now on the peanut butter cups in the center. And this is also gonna lock in our letters so those are completely smooth now. See you guys in the morning.
12 hours later, or the next morning, our clock was semi-cured. You'll notice I'm not touching the front of the clock because at this point, it's very easy to dent, scratch, even sort of like press in, almost like if it was still soft. But I cleaned it up and then left it for another few hours to cure where I could actually touch the front of the clock. Now it's time to sand the back. During that last flood pour, since I didn't have it suspended off the ground, some resin got into the bottom and actually hardened to the sides. Which luckily for us wasn't an issue because I needed to sand the back anyways to make it semi-transparent. So I bought what's called a random orbital sander, and I used 80 grit sandpaper multiple times. You'll notice that I'm constantly changing the sheet. It's only because when you're sanding resin, and I've found this multiple times, it gums up really quick onto your sandpaper and it actually becomes ineffective. Now I'm not throwing out these sheets when I'm done because they can just flake right off. It's just I needed to replace it to get a fresh one. Once it was done, we were left with this semi-transparent backing, which looked way better on the other side. Now it's time to find the center of the clock where our clock mechanism is gonna go. Measure that out, and now it's time to drill a hole. For this, I bought a drill bit the same size as the clock mechanism, and started drilling the hole from the back. Now it's time to add the clock guts. You can buy these at Michael's. You can even buy them with a whole set of numbers like I did with the chicken nugget clock in the past. It comes with a minute hand, an hour hand, a second hand, and obviously the guts. For this, we're gonna poke it through the back, just like that. We're gonna put the washer in, and then first we're gonna install the hour hand. Then the minute hand goes on. And then lastly, the second hand. Once that's all been installed, we just added a AA battery to the back. Boom! It is a peanut butter clock that says peanut butter. This is amazing. It works great. It looks amazing too. And I honestly will attribute that to both the ivory colored numbers, but also the flood pores made it look really nice and shiny. And there it is, the peanut butter clock. Guys, I'll be honest with you, I'm very happy with how this turned out. And like I said, I think a big part of this is because of the flood pores. Like, look at that. I really don't know what you're seeing right now, but it is one solid, clean, bubbleless layer of resin that makes this look very professional. There you guys have it. It is another clock made of food. If you guys have not seen it, I'll put a link in the description down below for my chicken nugget clock. It was kind of similar to this, except I used real chicken nuggets. This is real peanut butter cups and real peanut candy. You obviously have realized I've refrained from using the brand name. That's because this is not sponsored. You're aware of what these are, okay? Without me saying it. It is peanut butter cups with, and trust me, I hate it as much as you guys hate hearing it. Peanut butter candies, I know what they are. I'm just not gonna say it because it's not sponsored, okay? If you guys would like to see any other clocks made of anything else, now that I've got the mold, I would love to do more if you guys want to see more. Maybe Lego, dirt, dog kibble, whatever. God, those are all awful examples, but you guys have some good ones, I'm sure. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. It really helps me out. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, because every week I come out with a new unique art piece like this. Oh yeah, if you're interested in actually owning a piece of my art, I've got an art store, danocracyart.com, where I've got a few resin pieces, and some of my most popular like drawing pieces are up there as well. If you guys ordered one, I know, I apologize, it's been delayed, only because my printer that I go to, their shop is closed until August 7th. So the second it opens, I've already put in an order. They're gonna get printed, they're gonna get sent out to you. So if you've bought something, thank you so much for your patience, and thank you so much for supporting me. If you guys want to see an additional picture of this, go over to my Instagram, at Danocracy, where I've got a picture of this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week in another fun art video. It's gonna be fun. All right, see you guys later.